Welcome to Trains and Things in Ewing, New Jersey for their one-day sale. Here today, Saturday. Nice summer day to visit. So let's go inside and check them out. I'm back from the Trains and Things one-day sale. Had a fun day. It was a nice day out too. Wasn't too hot, just right. Nice sunny day. Usually their sales always, it seems to rain, but not this time. It was a nice day for a sale. They normally have like sidewalk sales, one-day sales. But if you're wanting to make one of their sales, keep an eye on our website or Facebook page. They usually announce when they're having these sales. And the one thing I like about Trains and Things in Ewing, New Jersey, is that the inventory is constantly changing every week. He does not always have the same inventory. And so the reason why is he takes on a lot of collections. I mean, a lot. He actually takes on more collections than he has room for in the store. So, they have storage units. But it's unbelievable what he gets in that store, coming through the store. You can visit this week and next week, see different things, different trains. So one of the things that they offer is a wish list. If you want to give them, your top train or a couple trains you're looking for, give them a wish list, and if they get it in, they'll call you up. Also, they have a layaway plan for those who, are wanting something, but it's just a little bit out of your reach of your budget. They're willing to work with you. They'll put on layaway until it's paid off. They're great that way. I would also like to thank those who came up to me and said that they enjoyed the videos. Met quite a few Dakman Productions YouTube channel fans at the store. It's always great talking to you guys. You guys are always afraid of bothering me or whatever have you. But no, I mean, without you guys, I wouldn't have the channel. So I'm willing to spend time and chatting with you guys in the store at the show. Usually the only show that I have a crunch and timeline for is the Greenberg show in Edison. And that's the reason why that particular show, I'm under such a time constraint, is because I'm trying to shoot videos of the show, and then right around 3 o'clock, I run trains with the Raritan Valley High Railers. So that particular show, I have to sort of like keep moving just to get the amount of videos and be able to run with the Raritan Valley High Railers. So, yeah, but other than that, I try to make time for you guys, talk to you guys. I appreciate your feedback, talking to me about your layouts and stuff, and it gives me an idea of what the viewers like you are running at your house. I guess I take for granted for what I got, because I figured, you guys just see this out here, but I've said it over and over again. This is only part of what I have. This layout is actually 35 foot long. It doesn't look like it, but it goes through a couple different rooms here. But basically, just about the whole length of the basement. So I can run a 20 car, 86 foot high cube boxcar train with ease on this layout. And that's what I designed it for, to run those long trains with long cars. And that was my dream. That's what I wanted. And I guess I got so used to this layout, I figured that most of the people have a layout this size, and they don't. Generally speaking, a lot of people have smaller layouts, and I realize that talking to you guys now, and it helps me to focus subjects to my channels. It helps me to fine tune my channel a little bit to bring the content that you guys are hopefully looking for. With that being said, Christy also mentioned that a lot of people, they get the collections from people who are moving south, like North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, whatever have you, and they don't have basements in those states, so a lot of them give up a lot of their trains for sale, or they go to Trains and Things and sell their collection, downsize or get out of it altogether. And that's another thing I never thought about is people down south don't have basements in their homes. So they got to try and run either out of a garage or a spare room or whatever have you, and those layouts are going to be small as well. They gave me an example, like a 7-car or 9-car passenger set. They would have a hard time selling at the store because not many people like myself have a layout big enough to even run a 7 or 9-car passenger car train set. She said on the average, most of their customers only want a 4-car passenger set and they're happy with that. I like sharing the enjoyment of the model train hobby. There is a lot of happiness to this, and especially when you accomplish something like this, and it's not finished and it's not perfect, and it'll probably never be perfect. A magazine has asked me 2 or 3 times for photos. I'm really not interested in a magazine because it's not a perfect layout, and I use it and I enjoy it, and so it's not this. Maybe because it's mine, I don't look at it as this, most perfect layout. um, and I have people who, would like to come and see it, and I'm like, well, I'm always afraid to show it in person because to me, it's just not. I don't know. It's just not this perfect layout that you're going to see. Uh, Maybe I'm being too hard on myself. You guys can let me know. I often get comments, this hobby's unaffordable. You're always showing these high-priced legacy and DCS engines and so forth and so on. Who can afford this hobby anymore? So let's take a look at this, because I'm going to call you guys out. Alright, so when I went to Trains and Things this time, I focused on a lot of rolling stock and locomotives that are really cheap. So if you paid attention to this video, you'll notice that a large percentage of the diesel locomotives focused in this video are right around $300 to $125 range on the average. So if you go through this video, you'll see diesel locomotives on the average from $125 to $300. A large percentage of them. So yes, you can get into the hobby and get a diesel locomotive for an average price of right around $200, $250. Used. There's nothing wrong with used. Nothing at all. And then maybe you'll have, if you're really on a budget, then you won't have the sounds. Who cares even if you just have a horn or no horn at all? It's what you make out of it. You don't need to have the horn and cruise controls and all the controls. Even with the steam locomotives, you can come away with steam locomotives pretty cheap too. So what I'm trying to say is it's still affordable if you want it to be. And let's say you're even on a real strict budget, because I understand, you're a senior citizen, maybe you're on Social Security. Okay. So Tony will still work with you. So let's say you want something small. You can buy, a diesel locomotive for $150. Tony's got some track there. He's got a ton. He's got a big, huge bin, and it's full of. I mean, bin like this tall, this wide, of nothing but tubular track, all loose, used. He's got plenty of used transformers. He's got a $10 bin of freight cars. So if you're really on, and I get, senior citizens on a strict Social Security budget, I get that part. And you can still get to the point where you can run or get trains. And even at that, he's got he would still work with you on a layaway plan, I'm sure. And, so you could have, something to run at home. What did I find? Well, you can see it's something in an orange box. I already have it out. That's why I'm doing this. So I'm filming, and, sometimes you don't expect to find something. But when I did, I found something, and I'm eyeing it up as I'm filming, and I actually lost track of where I was at in filming, which never usually happens. I'm always so focused, and then I'm like looking and looking, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wow. And I lost track. I had to do that one scene all over again. So, what did I get? Well, let's take a look. We'll talk about it real shortly, and we'll give her a run. Let's go. So I picked up this Lionel Penn Central GP30. Now I know what you're going to say. Dakman, didn't you just sell your last Penn Central locomotive, an SD45? Absolutely, I did. But this was a locomotive that I wanted and missed out on twice. And what I mean by that is, so Lionel introduced this Penn Central locomotive in the Volume 2 2014 catalog. So I missed out on that because I didn't get it back into O-Gauge until 2015, and at that time I was just focused on trying to get Conrail locomotives. Fast forward, Mr. Muffins decided to run a custom run of the same paint scheme on a GP30. Lionel tried to actually talk him out of it, saying that, he was crazy and it wouldn't sell. So Mr. Muffins made two different versions of the custom run. One with the red and white PC logo worm, and one with the all-white PC logo worm. And this is what they call the PC logo worm back here. Well, the first thing that sells out is the one with the red and white PC logo. So I missed out on that again. Fast forward, today, Tony gets, just recently got a collection in, and he got this particular locomotive sitting on the shelf. And I asked him which version it was, and it really didn't make a difference. Whether it was the Lionel or the Mr. Muffins custom run, he wasn't sure. But this is for sure the original Lionel version. So I really wanted this one. I really like the red and the white PC worm logo. From what I read, that was an experimental sort of paint scheme. It wasn't common to see the red and white logo. So when this, they really did experiment with the red and white logo on the number 2246 Penn Central locomotive. So I don't know what came first, if it was the red and white or if it was white. You can also see that 2246 was also it had or featured an all-white PC worm logo. So I'm going to say more than likely it happened after the red and white PC logo was applied to it. You guys can let me know in the comments. Penn Central number 2246 was eventually painted all blue once Conrail took it over.
This is the dispatch. Dispatcher, do you copy?
Roger that, dispatcher. I read you. Over.
Okay, start her up. Stand by for track orders.
Roger that. Let's get to work. Dispatcher, the air test is complete. Can we depart to the main line? Over.
Negative. Please hold. Over.
Copy that. Standing by. Out.
Dispatcher, you're clear to pull. Over.
That's great. Get ready to move. Out.
So my main reason for buying the Red Worm Penn Central GP30 was to create a Conrail Rainbow Years train. And so my Conrail Patch Penn Central GP30 will sort of like lead this train.
This is the dispatcher. Start up and hold. Over.
Okay, let's get to work. Out.
Train orders say hold the siding until 44 clears. Then we can take the main. He should be through any minute.
What are your orders?
Says hold here for 2 weeks and then take the main to the next airlock.
Dispatcher, we're ready. Is it okay to pull? Over.
Please stand by. Out.
Air test is good. Ready to pull.
It's gonna be running on the wall if we don't move on soon. Dispatcher, we're ready. Is it okay to pull? Over.
Take the green. Out.
We're done for the day. Out.
Now, for those who don't know, MTH did make a Conrail patched Penn Central caboose. Alright, so I decided to give this a short run because this video is already a little on the lengthy side. But again, appreciate the viewers coming up to me and saying hello and chatting about their layouts. Also like to thank Christy and Tony over there at Trains and Things for this wonderful deal. I don't think I got a wonderful deal just because on Dakman Productions, they're willing to deal and give you guys that special deal as well. And of course, if you see anything on this video that you liked and you're interested in, make sure you let them know you saw it on Dakman Productions. Until then, we'll see you guys at the next train show, next event. We'll see you trackside. Goodbye.